At SD Bullion, our everyday low prices are already lower than the big boys' so-called flash sales. One of the fastest growing bullion companies in the country, SD Bullion, just claimed a spot on the prestigious Inc. 500. So you have to ask yourself, why haven't you joined over 30,000 new customers who've recently made the switch to SD Bullion for the lowest gold, silver, and platinum bullion prices? To learn more, go to www.sdbullion.com and enjoy the lowest prices in the precious metals industry. Period.
You, the public, are the victims of phony money. And you, the public, can help prevent counterfeiting if you know your money.
Hey guys, it's SGT here. I have on the line the great G Edward Griffin. I wanted to preface this interview by letting you all know that I don't have enough time with Mr. Griffin to cover his entire incredible book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. I want to cover just the brief highlights from that book so that folks who are new to this information can understand what it is we're up against in terms of this private banking cartel. And then I want to try to move into current events because things are unfolding negatively so darn quickly in this country, it's almost hard to keep up. Mr. Griffin, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, my pleasure, Sean. Thanks for inviting me.
Now, I know you're not that familiar with my channel, so I just want to give you a little background about the audience. The folks that watch my channel are folks that are familiar with your work and understand the way the Federal Reserve System works.
After the money is printed, it is placed in circulation by member banks of the Federal Reserve Bank. There are 12 Federal Reserve districts throughout the country.
This private banking cartel that's been in control since 1913 and is still in control now is really the root of all the evil we're facing right now, aren't they?
Well, yeah, I think so, because nothing happens in our world today without money, and you can buy an awful lot of mischief if you make the money. And that's basically what we're dealing with. The Federal Reserve System is a cartel of banks, as you pointed out so well, and these fellas are really in control of our system, of our economy, of our government itself. They're in control of the media, and they've literally been able to acquire control because of their ability to create money and control who gets it and at what interest rates and all that sort of thing. Money is the ultimate weapon and the ultimate lever of power. So, yes, everything that happens today can be traced certainly indirectly and in many cases directly to this banking cartel.
You know, one of the things that we've all learned as we've woken up to what's going on in the world is that sound money, real money, money that can't be inflated away, it's at the apex of where liberty and the Constitution meet, isn't it, sir?
Yes, I think it is. Mm-hmm. There's no question about it. Our founding fathers understood the role of money and the danger of giving the power of money creation to anybody, and certainly not their elected representatives. They wrote the Constitution in a way to prohibit the issuance of fiat money, meaning money without gold or silver backing, to prohibit the states from doing that, and by implication to prohibit the federal government from doing that. And so certainly they didn't want any private group of people to do it either. Philosophically, there's nothing wrong with a group of people who want to issue money based on nothing but credit. There's nothing wrong to allow people the freedom to create fiat money, as long as they don't force you to use it. See, that's the trick. People should be free to offer anything they want to as money, and you should be free to accept it or reject it. Under those conditions, fiat money won't survive. It never does, because why would anybody voluntarily accept money with nothing behind it except the promise of the issuer, who already has a bad reputation for breaking all the promises he ever made? So there's not much danger in that sector if you give people the freedom to do that, as long as you also give them the freedom to reject it. And our problem arises because when governments issue money, they don't give you the freedom to reject it. They pass legal tender laws, and they require you to accept that money in the payment of all debts, public and private, or else you go to jail. So often, as is the case, the issues really revolve down to questions of freedom to choose. And now that's where there's a bridge between the issue of money and the issue of all other aspects in our society that impinge upon our freedom. So, that's the crossover point.
Yeah, well, it's a moral issue, though, too, because in theory, having a fiat currency is not necessarily the end of the world if you have an honorable government and if you can trust your quote-unquote representatives. But that's not what we have in this country anymore. And I just want to quote this from Zero Hedge, in which Sanford's Brad Hintz explains why there will never be any justice in America. And I quote, "Goldman Sachs won't face criminal prosecution related to sales of mortgage-linked securities because such a move could threaten the U.S. financial system," end quote. And that's really all you need to know, isn't it?
It's quite obvious that these specialists, the mortgage bankers, play a leading part in the country's progress on the road to better living for us all.
Well, yeah, and your statement that we need an honorable government, well, that's an oxymoron. There's no such thing as an honorable government. Never has been. Governments always deteriorate into criminal syndicates because their mission is to govern. And that may sound a little shocking to some people, but I came to the conclusion some time ago that our problem in the world stems pretty much on the idea that we have governments. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm all for anarchy, but what I think we should have is what this country was originally, which was not a government. We don't realize it. We called it a government. In fact, I think that's one of the errors that our founding fathers made, is they said, what kind of a government are we going to have? And, well, there's only one kind of a government, and that's one that governs. And that, by definition, a government is to govern. And when you have a group of people who can govern another group of people, it ultimately degenerates into a criminal syndicate. What this country was in the beginning was a protectorate, a system in which the purpose of the state was to protect the lives, liberty, and property of its citizens, and nothing more. It was a protectorate, but they called it a government, and of course it eventually became that. It didn't take very long before the people that went to work for this protectorate decided they wanted to change it back into a government, which all of the other states in the world have always been. So when you said earlier that an honorable government, it would be okay if an honorable government issued a fiat currency, I had to laugh inside thinking there's no such thing as an honorable government. By nature, it's fraud.
You're right. You're absolutely right. So the nature of government is to be tyrannical, and that's why the founders tried to put in place so many protections to prevent the government from becoming tyrannical, to make sure that the government was by and for the people. That's why we have three branches of government. But these three branches of government do not seem to serve the people anymore, whether it's the federal Supreme Court infringing on the Fourth Amendment, as they recently have, and the state Supreme Court of Indiana pretty much destroying the Magna Carta in the Fourth Amendment, saying that police can enter your house for absolutely any reason or no reason at all, and no outrage from the people, no marching in the streets, and it just really pours salt in the wound at this point, doesn't it?
Well, yes, it does, and it's just because people think in terms of what we should have, they think it should be a government. Every time we use the word government, we need to sort of choke on it a little bit and say, is that what we really want? Do we want a limited government? See, there's another oxymoron. There's no such thing as a limited government. If you're going to govern, you're supposed to govern. How do you limit the power of government? To govern means to govern with no limit. And when you try and make a limited government, you're fighting against logic. So I think what we need to start doing is using the other word, which is protectorate. We need a protectorate. The United States is a protectorate, should be a protectorate. And that focuses on the purpose of the state, which is not to govern us, not to provide for us, not to take care of us, not to tell us what to do, but to protect ourselves, to protect our lives, liberty, and property. That's what they wrote the Constitution for. And if we focus on the word protectorate, that makes us use the right word. And we think, is this state protecting us or is it governing us? And it's a big bite, a mental bite for most people, because we've never been taught to think in terms of protecting versus governing. We always talk about, well, what's the government going to do? What should the government do? And we keep using the wrong word. And as long as we keep using that word, government, as though it's okay, we'll never come up with the right solutions.
Every worker in the country, farmers, bank presidents, streetcar conductors, dentists, teachers, clerks, mechanics, even unskilled laborers, work 3 months of every year to pay for what government spends.
just seems that at every turn we're getting crushed by more tyrannical and authoritarian governmental regulation and action. It's as though they pulled out all the stops, and they literally there's no even pretense of a government for the people anymore.
No, they're running for the finish line as fast as they can now.
Yeah, and it's terrifying to those of us that are paying attention, because what is the end game for the people? I mean, at this point, what can people do?
There's nothing they can do as long as the state is in the hands of their enemy. I mean, it's just like saying to the inmates at a prison, "What can we do?" Well, you can't do anything as long as you're in the prison, and the prison guards are in control. They have all the control over you, and you're in the cells. There's nothing you can do. Our only hope is to recapture the system.
Well, sir, I want to rewind time here a little bit, because you're the person we all look to for this educational tool of understanding the Federal Reserve System, how it was implemented. And I'm not asking you to take us through your entire book or the entire story, because, again, there's a very savvy audience that's listening to you right now. But please, for those of us with friends and family, and that's 98% of us, that don't know this information and think that we are somehow conspiracy theorists, can you please help us understand how this tyrannical system was snuck past the people in 1913?
Well, sure, I'd be glad to do that. There's no theory here. This is just plain old history, and it's not widely known history. And I'm sure there are people that would just be just as happy as if the history weren't known at all. There's no theory here. The history shows quite clearly the Federal Reserve System was created back in 1910, actually. It was voted into law in 1913, but the thinking and the construction work was all done 3 years prior to that, in 1910, on a private island off the coast of Georgia. It was called Jekyll Island, and it was privately owned by a small group of billionaires from New York, people like J.P. Morgan and William Rockefeller and their business associates. It was a resort island, and it was a beautiful place. You can visit it today and see all their mansions, which have been restored and preserved, and the beautiful clubhouse where they had this meeting in 1910 where they created the Federal Reserve Act. And the reason they did that there is because they didn't want anybody to know who was creating it. And that seems strange, but when you think about it, the Federal Reserve System was sold to the American people back then, and still is being sold today, as a means of controlling the banks, a means of regulating the banks, and protecting the people against the avarice of those big bad bankers on Wall Street. Well, had they known that the Federal Reserve Act was written by the banks, by the very same big bad bankers that people were concerned about, well, they would have then understood that it was a scam, it was a fraud. And so they had to conceal the fact that they were the ones that wrote the bill. When I say they, we're talking about 6 people who represented the biggest banks in the United States, with interlocking financial interests with the biggest banks of the world, including the Rothschilds in Europe and the Warburgs in Europe. And we had, the J.P. Morgan Empire and the Rockefeller Empire here. And those are the biggest financial institutions of the time, and they're the ones that wrote the Federal Reserve Act. So that should ring a few bells right there and raise a few eyebrows. We understand there was a great deal of secrecy about the writing of the bill, and a lot of people didn't understand the secrecy because they didn't really understand who wrote the bill and what their interests were. Well, when you look at that history, and as I say, this is not conspiracy theory. This is just plain old history. You can go to Jekyll Island, as a matter of fact, where all this happened, and you can visit the library there, the archives, and most of this stuff is in their filing cabinets. Oh, incidentally, you may find this of interest, but my book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, is a very good seller there in the bookstore, in the souvenir store.
Ironic, isn't it?
Yeah. But anyway, the fact is that this is a matter of history, and what they created there is a cartel. They didn't create a government agency. They created a cartel, no different than a banana cartel or an oil cartel. It just happens to be a banking cartel. But they had to make it look like a government agency. And that's why they passed it into law. They took the cartel agreement after it was all written up. Then they took it back to Washington, and they found some politicians to, introduce it as a law. So what they did is to take a cartel agreement. They took the words off the top that said cartel agreement, and they replaced it with the words that said Federal Reserve Act. And they passed it into law. And that means that everyone, you and I and all of us, have to agree, or rather have to abide, I should say, by the agreement that was written by the banks, or we go to prison because it's in law. And that makes it look like a government agency because if it has the power to send us to jail, and only government can do that, we think, but that's not the case at all. So it's a cartel that's been given the force and effect of a government agency, but it's completely controlled by the private banks. So having said that, and this is a short version of it, it should come as no surprise when you look at the scene today, and every time the banks get into trouble, what happens? Congress dutifully comes into action and votes another $1 trillion or $7 trillion, and the money is created out of nothing by the cartel, the banking cartel, the Federal Reserve Act, and it's given to whom? Well, to the banks, of course. It's given to the banks or to the big debtors that owe money to the banks and are having trouble making their monthly payments and making their interest payments. So everything that the Federal Reserve does, backed up by the Federal Reserve Act and making it legal, always benefits the banks. This is for the banks, of the banks, and by the banks. And it should come as no surprise once you understand its history and the fact that it is nothing more or less than a banking cartel.
The national debt rises. 1933, 22 billion, and up it goes. Down go employment and earnings. 1937, the mounting debt has its impact on our struggle to recover from the Depression. Factories close, unemployment, unrest. But the debt continues soaring, up to 40 billion, to 45, and now on its way to $49 billion. Such a debt, created by wasteful and reckless spending, today makes more difficult our job of paying for the national defense we need.
All right, and to be absolutely clear for those of our family and friends that might be taking their precious time to listen to something as important as this, most will choose to watch Dancing with the Stars, sir. Help me understand what that means to the generation now that is so far removed from that history that they can't even begin to understand it. They don't know that Andrew Jackson fought against these same people. They don't know that Abraham Lincoln fought against these same people. They have no understanding of how wealthy these powers are. These are powers and wealth that far supersede the wealth of a Warren Buffett or a Bill Gates, which is one generational wealth without the license to print money out of thin air. First of all, how do we help people understand the gravity of our situation, number one, and number two, how do we possibly begin to fight against this thing?
Well, I don't know how we get people to understand it unless they want to. If they want to, it's a simple matter. But unfortunately, I've come to the conclusion in my older days that there are just a bunch of people out there that don't want to understand. They have been conditioned to think that, well, it doesn't make any difference what you know or what you understand. Somebody's in charge and they'll take care of us, and that's fine. If they don't take care of us, well, then there's nothing we can do about it. And a lot of people like that. But fortunately, the history of the world is not written by those kinds of people. They're the followers. They'll go along with whatever happens. The people that write history, the people that make things happen, usually is about less than 3% of the population. So I'm concerned about the 3%, not the 97%. I mean, I'd like them all to be, prosperous and happy and free and, not have pain and have pleasure and all that sort of thing. But I know that they're going to follow. And so I've just kind of written them off in the back of my mind. But I'm really interested in those 3%, the movers and the shakers, the people who care about the future. They care about the unborn population of the world. They care about their grandkids and so forth. And so I think those people, you don't really have to make them understand. Just give them access to the information, and they'll grab it. They'll reach for it. They'll recognize it immediately as truth because it answers all of the questions of the modern day. But I think you first started off to ask the question is, what impact does this have on the present generation? Well, the impact it has on people, whether they know the history or not, is pretty profound. And then, in other words, once they understand what's going on, they're going to realize that they are being legally plundered by the banking system and the political system. Yes.
You're right. I just want to interject because my experience has been with folks that are of your generation, whether they're my parents or my wife's parents, or even a lot of people in my generation, sir. They don't care. It's as though our culture has been neutered of its sense of liberty, and it's as though the sense of what is right and what is wrong has been removed from the heart of what made America America. It doesn't matter that the banks were given trillions of dollars in 2008. Just as long as the Dow goes up, people are happy. They're fat and happy in their retirement accounts. I have a neighbor and a buddy of mine who works for UBS. He makes $500,000 a year, and he doesn't really understand the first thing about the Federal Reserve. But what's worse is that he doesn't care.
Well, that's my point.
He's fat and happy, and it's so frustrating, sir. I mean, what happened to the heart of this country?
Well, I think it's partly conditioning.
Like millions of his fellow Americans, John Q. Public earns enough money to keep up the payments on a new car. He takes great pride in owning a fine, new, long-term mortgaged home that was built to last a lifetime. Mrs. John Q. Public no longer finds housework fatiguing drudgery, thanks to a host of labor-saving devices.
We have an organization you probably know. It's called Freedom Force International, and it's a group of people all over the world who are united and resolved to do something about it. We have a plan for recapturing control of our systems, and the reason I mention that is because I'm in contact with people we have members in 68 countries now, and we've just formed a new chapter of Freedom Force in Sweden. And we have members in Sweden and Norway and all the Scandinavian countries, and I get the same story there, particularly the activists there, the ones who really want to make a difference, are saying, the people here are so conditioned, and they don't want to stand out. They don't want to go against the crowd. Their collectivist mentality is like a beehive mentality. Mm-hmm. They would just want to be a part of the group, and they don't like to make waves, and they trust they feel that they should trust their authorities, because if they don't, there's nothing they can do about it anyway. So I go on, and they tell me about this mentality that you're just describing. But I guess in Scandinavian countries, they've had this condition longer than we have. And it's really a dilemma, because many people are conditioned almost from the cradle to not make waves and certainly not go against consensus. So I think it's partly a conditioning and educational process, and our schools have been greatly responsible for that, because, we teach our kids to be, quote, good citizens. That means, don't do anything different. Don't challenge the teacher. Just follow the rules and be a good citizen. Be a team player. Well, sure, there's some value to team playing, but there's also a time when you want to stand up for yourself and for the rights of others, and you may have to go against the team. So, but that trait is not taught. It's not encouraged in our schools, and I guess in every collectivist society, one of the roles of the educational system is to get that out of the mental climate of the students, so they always think in terms of following orders and going along with a group.
Sure. Well, it's been engineered out to a large degree, hasn't it? I mean, whether we talk about the Rockefeller Foundation or inevitably we seem to get back to these same powers that are in control of our monetary system, that have taken control over society at large, and to some extent dumbed down society to make society less engaged and less libertarian, less focused on things like truth and honor.
Exactly, yes.
I think it was chapter, was it 25, in which you wrote Time Travel into the Future, a Pessimistic Scenario?
Yes.
You really laid out what was going to happen, and it's all happening now, isn't it?
Yes, it's amazing. I surprised myself. It was a whimsical journey into the future. I thought, okay, if this continues as it's going, where is it going to be? So that's when I wrote that chapter. And I thought it was kind of extreme when I wrote it, but as you just alluded, today, reading it, much of it has already happened. And the rest of it is rapidly unfolding as we speak.
There is also the story of the value of the dollar, which may decrease. How does this happen? Why does the value of the dollar decrease?
As we talk about this monetary system that's really done such damage to our republic over the past 100 years, we've just surpassed the debt ceiling. Apparently, government hasn't shut down. They're somehow making this thing continue. People are talking about QE3. My question for you is: are the bankers, are the owners of this system at any risk from the collapse, which now seems inevitable? Or is it all part of the grander design to move us directly into a one-world government and a one-world currency?
I think under the present conditions, with the near complete control that the banking institutions have over the governments of the world, I don't think there's much chance of the owners of the banks suffering, because they'll always just pull the strings and go to their legislative bodies, and they'll simply authorize the creation of more money out of thin air to bail out the banks. That's the way they have done it, and right now there's no serious challenge to that power to do so. So I think that's what they're going to continue to do, and of course that simply means they'll continue to plunder the taxpayers and send that money into the banks, into their closest associates.
The Federal Reserve Bank is set up to handle thousands of checks from hundreds of banks in a single day. The banks and the corporations which are clustered around the banks. So I don't think there's much danger from that point of view. But the second point you mentioned is also, I agree with that. I think that these people are smart enough to know. They know the problems that we're talking about, perhaps even better than we, because they're the ones that are creating the problems. But I think they also have already figured out a way to perpetuate it so that it will not affect them, and that is to create a one-world monetary system where there's no place to escape. If we have an IMF or an international, let's say a UN, a central bank of some kind that replaces the Federal Reserve, or works in coordination with it, with all the other central banks of the world, and they unite and they create a central global fiat currency manufacturing factory of some kind, then the process just simply continues, and all the banks participate in it. They'll be allocated their share of the plunder, and the people will just continue to be plundered, that's all. But it'll be done on an international basis, finally, instead of on a national basis.
So despite the trillions of dollars poured into the banking system since 2008, we see manufacturing ISM at the lowest level since the Lehman collapse. Goldman's cutting non-farm payroll forecast to 100,000. The money they poured into the system has not fixed the problem. So at the end of the day, how do we protect ourselves? What would you recommend for your brood? I note in your book, Creature from Jekyll Island, you've dedicated it to the next generation. You say, especially my own brood, James, Daniel, Ralph, and Kathleen. Sir, you care about people, and that's what we love about you. How can we protect people that are listening to this?
Well, there's actually two aspects to that as I see it. One is we have to do whatever we can to protect ourselves in the short term, and that means basically a combination of getting out of debt, getting as much put aside as we can to cover us through emergencies. That means food. That means making sure that you're living in a secure place and that you have a lot of friends and family around you, because when things fall apart, as they have, I should say, in just every other country in the world, when crisis hits, people need friends and family to fall back on. But get out of debt, and if you have any disposable wealth after that, I would definitely put it into gold and silver and food, and that's the short term. That doesn't really solve a problem. It's just help you perhaps survive a little bit longer and a little bit better than others, but it doesn't take care of the long picture because the crisis continues. For the long picture, which is where I spend most of my time thinking about, we have to retake the system back.
Only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it.
We have to get these people out of control. We have to recapture our governments. We have to
teach people the value of individualism as opposed to collectivism. We have to show them the reasons why they should reject all of these panaceas that have been offered to them. And that's going to take a little time, but I think it can be done. That's the reason we created Freedom Force International, by the way. And I know we don't have time to go in all of that, but for anybody that really wants to focus on the long view of history and think in terms of what we can do now to lay the foundation for an eventual recovery, I urge you to come to the Freedom Force website, which is www.freedomforceinternational.org. freedomforceinternational.org. And there's a lot of reading there, but you'll see what our strategy is and what our philosophy is. And I think for anybody that's really serious about this and is willing to look at the long view instead of just that short view, what are we going to do between now and the next election, I think you're going to find the answer on the Freedom Force website.
Okay, and I know we can also find you at therealityzone.com and Unfiltered News, correct?
Thanks for reminding me on that. We have a free newsletter. It's called Unfiltered News. And if you come to therealityzone.com, it won't take you long before you'll see an icon that'll take you to the Unfiltered News. And you can Google that, too, as a matter of fact, and see what our current issue looks like. And then just send us your email, sign up for it. It's free, and I think you'll like that, too.
All right. Well, G. Edward Griffin, it was a pleasure speaking with you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Sean, thank you. And you keep up this great work you're doing.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Oh, by the way, are you in Freedom Force?
No, I should join, and in fact, maybe I should.
Of course you should.
Well, let's have a call to action for viewers to really get on board. Is that something, can the common man like me, can my viewers, can my subscribers join Freedom Force? That's what it's all about, huh?
That's what it's all about, yes. Yeah, well, anybody can join if they agree with the principle expressed in the Creed of Freedom. That's it. And you will, I know you will. That's one of the things about Freedom Force is that we want everybody in agreement with a certain philosophy. Otherwise, what's the point? We'll be arguing with ourselves otherwise. But yes, the answer is anybody that agrees with the Creed of Freedom is more than welcome. And the amazing thing, Sean, is that this creed will appeal as much to people in Russia and in Afghanistan and in China as it does in America and Canada and England and Australia. I mean, it's universal. Everybody longs for this individual liberty. And once they understand what the foundations are, that's like an epiphany that will never be undone. It's like ringing the bell. Once the bell is rung, you cannot unring the bell.
That's right. Well, G. Edward Griffin, you're one of our favorite people. We really, really respect and admire you, and I thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to speak with us today, sir.
All right. Thank you, Sean. It's been my pleasure.
All right. We'll talk to you again soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Guys, thanks so much for watching. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be doing these. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for all your support. Good night.